Story 1. It was a hot summer day when Sarah and her family moved into their new house. The house was old and had a lot of character, but it needed a lot of work. Sarah's parents spent most of their time fixing things up, while Sarah and her brother, Billy, explored the house. One day, while playing hide and seek, Billy found a door in the ceiling of the hallway. "Look, Sarah, there's a secret room up here," he called out. Sarah climbed up to the attic with Billy, and they found a dusty old room filled with old toys. There were dolls, teddy bears, and even an old rocking horse. As they started to play with the toys, they noticed that they all seemed to be watching them. Their eyes seemed to follow Sarah and Billy as they moved around the room. It was a bit creepy, but they tried not to think too much of it. The next day, Sarah woke up to find that her favorite doll from the attic was in her bed. She was sure she had left it in the attic, but maybe her parents had moved it. That night, Sarah heard a strange noise coming from the attic. It sounded like something was moving around up there. She tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, Sarah and Billy went up to the attic to play with the toys again. But this time, something was different. The toys were arranged in a circle, facing inward, as if they were having a secret meeting. As Sarah and Billy approached the circle, they noticed that the eyes of the toys seemed to be glowing. Suddenly, the toys started to move on their own. The dolls' heads turned, the teddy bear's paws reached out, and the rocking horse started to rock back and forth. Sarah and Billy were terrified. They tried to run, but the door to the attic had been locked from the outside. They were trapped with the possessed toys. The toys started to close in on them, their eyes glowing brighter and brighter. Sarah and Billy screamed for help, but nobody could hear them. As the toys drew closer, Sarah noticed that there was one toy in the center of the circle that was not moving. It was an old Jack-in-the-Box, with a creepy smile and dark, hollow eyes. Sarah and Billy realized that the Jack-in-the-Box was controlling the other toys. They had to destroy it to escape. Sarah grabbed a nearby toy truck and threw it at the Jack-in-the-Box, shattering it into pieces. The other toys fell to the ground, lifeless. The door to the attic suddenly unlocked, and Sarah and Billy ran out, never looking back. They told their parents what had happened, but nobody believed them. From that day on, Sarah and Billy avoided the attic at all costs. They could still hear the toys moving around up there at night, and sometimes they would catch a glimpse of a glowing eye in the darkness. Years later, when Sarah was all grown up and had a family of her own, she went back to visit her childhood home. The house had been renovated, and the attic had been turned into a playroom for her children. But as Sarah's children played with the toys in the attic, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She knew that the toys were still watching, still waiting for their next victims. And she knew that one day, they would strike again. Story 2. It was a cold Christmas Eve when Jenna and her family arrived at their remote cabin in the woods. Jenna's parents had rented the cabin for a quiet holiday, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. As they unpacked their belongings, Jenna noticed an old, tattered teddy bear sitting on one of the shelves. It was wearing a Santa hat and had a friendly smile on its face. Jenna's parents explained that the bear had been left there by the previous occupants of the cabin, and they suggested that Jenna play with it while they finished unpacking. Jenna took the bear to her room and started to play with it. As she hugged it close, she felt a strange energy emanating from the bear. It was warm and comforting, but there was something unsettling about it. That night, Jenna had trouble sleeping. She kept hearing strange noises outside her window, like something was scratching at the glass. She tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but the scratching continued. The next morning, Jenna woke up to find that the bear was no longer on her bed. She searched the cabin but couldn't find it anywhere. Her parents suggested that maybe she had left it outside, but Jenna was sure she hadn't. That night, the scratching at Jenna's window started again. This time, it was more insistent. Jenna got out of bed to investigate, and as she approached the window, she saw a figure standing outside. It was the bear, but it was different now. Its eyes were glowing red, and its friendly smile had turned into a sinister grin. It scratched at the window with its claws, trying to get in. Jenna screamed for her parents, but they didn't believe her. They thought she was having a nightmare. Over the next few days, the bear started to appear more and more frequently. Jenna would catch glimpses of it out of the corner of her eye, always watching her with its red, glowing eyes. She tried to get rid of it, throwing it in the trash, burying it in the snow, but it always found its way back to her. One night, as Jenna lay in bed, she heard a strange noise coming from the living room. She tiptoed down the hallway and peeked inside. There, in the middle of the room, was the bear, surrounded by the other toys from the cabin. They were all watching her with their glowing red eyes, waiting for something. Jenna tried to run, but the toys had blocked the doorway. They closed in on her, their eyes growing brighter and brighter. As the toys drew closer, Jenna realized that the bear was controlling them all. She had to destroy it to escape. Jenna grabbed a nearby candlestick and swung it at the bear, smashing it to pieces. The other toys fell to the ground, lifeless. But Jenna knew it wasn't over. As she turned to leave the cabin, she felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. She looked back and saw the bear, reassembled and more terrifying than ever, standing in the doorway. Jenna ran out of the cabin and never looked back. She knew that the bear would always be watching her, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. Years later, as Jenna sat by the fireplace with her own children, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She knew that the bear was still out there, waiting for someone else to find it and unleash its evil once again. And she knew that one day, it would find its way back to her. Story 3. It was a cold and dark evening in Animosa when Mark and his friends found an abandoned toy car on the side of the road. The car was rusty and covered in dirt, but it still had a few working parts, so they decided to take it home and fix it up. As they started to play with the toy car, strange things began to happen. The car would move on its own, even when nobody was touching it. At first, Mark thought it was just a glitch in the toy's mechanics, but as the nights went on, things got worse. Mark would wake up in the middle of the night to find the toy car driving around his room, as if controlled by an unseen force. He tried to ignore it, but it became harder and harder to sleep with the constant whirring of the car's motor. One night, Mark woke up to find the toy car staring at him with its headlights on. As he approached it, he noticed that the headlights were shining with an eerie red glow. Suddenly, the car began to move, driving towards him with increasing speed. Mark tried to run, but the car was too fast. It chased him through the house, crashing into walls and knocking over furniture. Mark's friends were awakened by the commotion, and they tried to stop the car, but it was too powerful. As the car closed in on Mark, he could hear the sound of a child's laughter coming from inside it. He knew then that something was terribly wrong with the toy car. It wasn't just a toy anymore. It was possessed by an evil spirit. Mark and his friends tried to destroy the car, but nothing seemed to work. They burned it, smashed it, and even buried it in the backyard, but it always found its way back to them. The car became more and more violent, causing damage and chaos wherever it went. One night, Mark had had enough. He confronted the toy car, determined to rid himself of it once and for all. As he reached out to grab it, he felt a cold, clammy hand wrap around his wrist. Mark looked up to see a ghostly child standing before him, its eyes glowing with malevolent energy. The child had possessed the toy car, using it as a conduit to enter the physical world. Mark knew he had to act fast. He grabbed a nearby hammer and smashed the toy car to pieces. The child's spirit let out a piercing scream, and then vanished into thin air. From that day on, Mark and his friends never saw the haunted toy car again. But they knew that the child's spirit was still out there, searching for a new host to possess. And they knew that they would never be able to escape the evil that had been unleashed that fateful night in Animosa. Story 4. It all started when Emily was a little girl. Her parents had bought her a handmade toy from a local craftsman named Bram. The toy was a small wooden figurine with a painted face and black button eyes. Emily loved it and played with it every day. But soon, strange things started to happen. Emily would wake up in the middle of the night to find the toy staring at her from the foot of her bed. Its eyes seemed to follow her wherever she went, and she could hear it whispering to her in a raspy voice. As Emily got older, the toy became more and more sinister. It would move on its own, appearing in different rooms of the house without anyone touching it. Emily's parents thought it was just her imagination, but they couldn't explain the scratches that started to appear on the walls, or the strange symbols that were etched into the wooden floors. Years went by, and Emily moved out of her parents' house. But the toy stayed with her, always lurking in the shadows, watching her every move. Emily tried to get rid of it, but it always found its way back to her. Then, Emily had a daughter of her own, and the curse seemed to spread to her as well. The toy started to target her daughter, appearing in her room at night and whispering to her in the same raspy voice. Emily tried to protect her daughter, but the toy was too powerful. Emily's husband, Mike, became convinced that their family was cursed. He started to research Bram the toy maker, and he discovered that the man had a dark history. Bram was rumored to have made deals with the devil, using his toys as vessels for evil spirits. Mike knew they had to get rid of the toy once and for all, but it wouldn't be easy. They tried to burn it, but it wouldn't catch fire. They tried to bury it, but it always dug its way out of the ground. Finally, they decided to lock it away in a chest and throw it into the river. For a while, it seemed like the curse had been lifted. But then, strange things started to happen again. Emily's daughter started having nightmares, and the scratches and symbols started to appear in their new house. One night, Emily woke up to find the toy sitting on her chest, its button eyes staring into her soul. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The toy whispered to her in Bram's raspy voice, promising to take her soul to hell. Emily fought back, grabbing the toy and throwing it across the room. But it was too late. The curse had taken hold, and Emily knew that she would never be free of it. Years went by, and Emily's daughter had children of her own. But the curse continued, passing down through the generations like a family heirloom. Each new child that was born was destined to be haunted by Bram's toys, their lives forever changed by the evil that lurked within them. And so, the curse of Bram the toy maker continues to this day, a never-ending nightmare that has claimed countless lives and souls. Will it ever end? Only time will tell. But one thing is for certain, the darkness will always find a way to return. This will always find a way to return. This will always